listening to America First Radio.
And we're going to win, win, win. And we're going to make America great again.
Here is your host, Paul Adams.
Hello, Patriots. It's Sunday, November 13th. Doesn't the air smell cleaner now that Trump has won the election? You know, I just love the smell of truth in the morning. Now, just a heads up here, with this podcast, I'll be talking a whole lot about God. So if you have a problem with that, you know, I suggest you tune out. I don't want to ruin your day. But first, I want to congratulate Donald Trump on this historic victory. I think God let me know how this was accomplished one early morning. You see, we the people begged and pleaded and prayed and fasted to God to give us a leader who could create a government that is of, by, and for the people, to return the government back to the people. And he gave us Donald Trump. Mr. Trump did a phenomenal job on the campaign trail because God sustained him, he inspired him, he protected him, he magnified him. Now, the boots on the ground, of course, we had Alex Jones, who was at the tip of the spear, Roger Stone, who in this, at least physical, temporal realm, was very easily MVP. We also had Steve Pacinic. Then there's Dinesh D'Souza, Peter Scheiser, the author of Clinton Cash, Dick Morris, Larry Nichols, a cast of thousands. And also what I call the Hive, okay? The Hive, the thousands of tweeter warriors who collectively registered maybe hundreds of millions of impressions every day. They were legion. But in the spiritual realm, the MVP was God, our Father in heaven. And you know what really bothers me is that hardly anybody acknowledges that. How quickly we forget that we are one nation under God. You know, our national anthem has a verse, the third verse. You know, it says, "Blessed with victory and peace, may this heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then onward we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in glory shall wave o'er land of the free and the home of the brave." You know, we prayed, we pleaded, we fasted, and that was just a few days ago. And who out there is giving the glory to God? Well, some are. See, God told me what happened on election night. He told me in the early morning hours of November 10th, around 4 a.m., in a flash, just like a revelation, a burst of knowledge just flashed into my head while I was still kind of asleep. And I have learned to recognize these kinds of communications from him, especially if it's early in the morning. I'm going to tell you what he told me. I'm going to leave it till the very last. And you can choose to believe it or not believe it. I really don't give a rat's behind what you think at this point, because I am so used to this kind of communication, and I've seen so many miracles over my lifetime. I'm now 63 years old, folks. Satan had me there for a long time growing up, and even in my middle years. We can also thank Julian Assange, the intelligence community. We can thank the people behind the soft counter coup. You know, we can talk about the phenomenal, triumphal campaign that Donald Trump marshaled. And as far as Hillary Clinton is concerned, this Trump victory was not supposed to happen. So this podcast, as you'll see, is more than just a celebration of Donald Trump's win. It's also a celebration of the ideal that we are one nation under God. I was watching a clip the other day of President Trump's jet getting the water salute at LaGuardia Airport, and I got misty-eyed, I got to tell you. That plane looks so beautiful with that water salute. He has taken so many slings and arrows, and he deserves now our thanks, our love, our gratitude, our prayers. But ladies and gentlemen, there is an intricate relationship between the visible and the invisible, between the physical and the metaphysical. Like I've always said, and as others have said, this has been a spiritual battle, not just a political battle, and it's not over. You see, there is an intricate relationship between the God of Israel, who is also the God of America, and the people of America and Israel. America was not meant to be a theocracy or a banana republic. It was meant to be a nation where laws have to be endorsed. And perhaps we need to rephrase it so that it makes a little bit more sense. Instead of laws, we could say best practices, where best practices can produce the best possible environment for people to experience peace and prosperity and happiness in the world, where choices can abound and free will can be championed. So I'm going to zoom out here to 200,000 feet. Bear with me. Just put on your oxygen mask. You'll be all right. For me, life on Earth is just a short learning phase. It's a school in our eternal progression. We have come to this world with nothing. We're going to leave with nothing, except for our character and the relationships we have built over time. So we are spiritual beings in a very short mortal journey. And in some countries, you would be executed just for thinking that, for your beliefs. America is the only nation, or should be the only nation, where you can believe whatever you want to believe as long as it doesn't interfere with somebody else's beliefs. Any ideology or religion which tries to supersede, denigrate, replace the Constitution is not a good fit. This is why Sharia law is not a good fit, with all due respect to our Muslim brothers and sisters. It does not belong in America. It belongs in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, in other Arabic countries. Bear in mind that even Egypt had to expel the Muslim Brotherhood because it was too radical, too extreme. So this is why an ideology that tries to replace capitalism and democracy can never fit in the American framework. And when the founders drafted the inspired Constitution, they gave us what could be called a best practices manual, which above all champions free will, free agency. Now, God... He has his own best practices manual, okay, refined over millions of years, tested in all kinds of civilizations, not just our planet. And he shares his best practices with us because he wants us to live joyful, fulfilled lives. He wants us to develop hearts and minds that are similar to his. He wants us to transform, to ascend, to go to a higher plane. See, he has already been through what we're going through. He's had his own mortal experience. He knows what works and what doesn't. So there's no point in trying to reinvent the wheel here. When he says, thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not bear false witness, there's a reason for that. So when it comes to the reality of God, okay, what really gets me is that intelligent people, brainy intellectuals like the late Christopher Hitchens, may he rest in peace. I really admired Christopher. People like Sam Harris will readily concede that the universe must surely be populated by extraterrestrials with super advanced technologies that have telepathic abilities, who can travel in sophisticated spaceships. That's almost a given for them. But that's where it stops. Spiritual beings, God, angels, demons, those are too far out there. They're woohoo. Except for, instances where the Pentagon actually hires people that have the ability to view remotely. So many of these people think they themselves are gods, and they want to create their own utopia through sheer human ingenuity. Soros is one of them. They forget, though, that without plugging into the source, they are nothing. So instead of plugging into the source, they will plug into an alternative source like Lucifer, who will promise them wealth and power and will give them sugar-coated cyanide solutions, like great social platforms that eventually don't work because they do not champion free will. They take away our liberties, that masquerade as libertarian platforms but are really Trojan horses, that hide the associated costs. So it simply is beyond the realm of possibility for some of these people. It's unfathomable, not even remotely possible. It does not compute in their minds that there could possibly be a God. Yet they'll go the other way. They'll take the other fork in the road, and they will readily accept the reality of Lucifer and will engage in rituals and initiation rites like spirit cooking, black magic. They'll have witches' covens, and they'll hex and curse. They'll do all kinds of aberrant things to try and alter reality. Look, for me, when we have arrived to the point of being able to clone and can almost unlock right now the immortality gene, we are at the point where the NSA can tap into every cell phone and email server. It would be unthinkable to not believe in the possibility of a supreme being. It would just be unthinkable for me. So to think we've done all this in a matter of a couple hundred years, imagine what we could do as a human race in 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years. You see my logic? Do you see how I think about God? I see him as an entity that has been able to assimilate over millennia light and truth and love, and knows what works and what doesn't work. Even Richard Dawkins admits that God or a supreme intelligence could exist as a result of evolution. And of course, for him, evolution is the only mechanism by which that could happen. But he never stops to explain who designs the software, the instructions for biogenesis. There's all kinds of problems with evolution. I'm not going to get into it. Let's get back to America and the election here. The problem with America has been that America no longer relies on inspiration from God. It is too distracted. It disregards his best practices manual. Instead, America is addicted to entertainment, to television programming. By programming, I mean, it's an interesting word. It is programming intended to cut us off from God, okay? As any general will tell you in warfare, the first objective is to cut off the enemy's communications. Lucifer knows this all too well, so he does his best to distract us, to cut us off from the source. And he's been very, very successful. God's contract with America, if we are to have a nation under God, is very simple. We have a choice. We can use God's best practices manual, and he will be there to guide us, to lead us, to warn us when we need him. Or we can fail to rely on him, and by doing so, we tune into Lucifer's playbook. It's a zero-sum game. We can't have it both ways. We either lean towards God or we'll lean towards Lucifer and eventually assimilate his doctrine, which all you have to do is, read Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and you get a gist. So what happens if we fail to adhere to God's best practices manual, let's say the Bible? For some other religions, like the Mormons, there's additional scripture which has been brought forth over the decades, the last century, which add to the Bible. They do not conflict with the Bible. But what happens if we disregard God's best practices manual? Well, what happens is we come to a point where we are seeing it right now. We see the dissolution of the republic. It's that simple, folks. We have come very, very close to seeing America absorbed into the New World Order. If Hillary got elected, that would have been it. Now, let me just work my way into how God saved this election. I was into 1 Chronicles chapter 21 yesterday. I was reading about David, who did something he wasn't really supposed to do, okay? He took account of the population. He numbered his people. Why was that a bad idea? Maybe because then word would have gotten out to his enemies and they could plan accordingly to defeat Israel. It's always better to let your enemy think you are maybe a little bit weaker than you really are. So God sent a prophet to David, and he gave him a choice of 3 punishments for what he had done. David chose the third one, 3 days of plagues, and within 3 days, 70,000 people, Israelis, died. Then David looked up in the sky and saw the angel hovering between the earth and heaven, the angel of death with a sword in hand. And the Lord commanded the angel to stop the killing. So my point is this. If God can whip Israel's butt just to teach David a lesson for doing something as trivial, as trivial maybe to us, as counting or taking a census, what can God do to the enemies of America? Now back to the election. In one of my other podcasts, you can hear Soros say in an interview that the steal was done. Okay, that Hillary was going to win. It was a done deal.
How worried are you by the popularity of Donald Trump?
Well, Donald Trump is, I actually listened to the debates. We discovered the Achilles heel of Western civilization, and they know that their days are numbered because there is no alternative except terrorism.
Or fears about voters, and what are the policies that the voters in the U.S. should be focusing on?
Well, here I have to confess to a little bit of bias. So you take that into account. I think it's going to lead to a landslide for Donald Trump in the popular vote, not in the electoral vote, because their paid political announcements will have a big role, and so the electoral thing will be closer. But the popular vote will be a landslide, because we are a small minority of extremists, and so we are all moving in that direction. And while I don't think that Donald Trump has any chance of being elected.
But you think Hillary Clinton is a done deal?
Yeah. And I do think, actually, she's the one who's most qualified. But
that through some special paid political announcements, Hillary would win the election, no questions asked. I'll come back to Soros in a minute. This election was supposed to have been a done deal, and all the sycophants knew it. The corrupt MSM had prepared graphics days ahead showing Hillary winning. These surfaced on Twitter. Newsweek published a magazine with a cover of Hillary's victory on it. They had to recall 125,000 copies. Then you want to take a look at the bewilderment of these people. Look at how Wolf Blitzer reacted when the election went to Trump. He was catatonic. Why? Because they had been primed to expect a win by Hillary. For me, the biggest tip-off is the look on the faces of the White House staff in front of the lawn with what's her name, Valerie Jarrett leaning against the column there. They all look like they're posing for an antacid commercial. They look like they have stomach pains. They are holding their stomachs. Their faces look like a combination of stunned and disbelief and anger, hurt. It's as if they knew they had all their bases covered. They knew that Soros had promised them. And another red flag, there hasn't been a single challenge on the results. Anywhere in the United States, there hasn't been a single challenge. Usually the count will be challenged if there is a 1.5% to 2% margin. And there has been that kind of a margin. You would think that Hillary would challenge the results. You would think that John Podesta would be screaming blue murder and ask for recounts and investigations. So what happened? She actually stole 5 states with 98% wins in some precincts. And you want to believe that these were not rigged precincts? By some estimates, 20 million illegals voted. So here's what happened. The voting was so padded in favor of Hillary that to open an investigation would have basically exposed them. It would have incriminated the whole DNC and the Hillary campaign. Then, during the election night, we learned that Hillary canceled her fireworks. She must have known something was terribly wrong. It wasn't going as planned. They had planned an event for her victory speech that just the setup alone cost $5 million. It looked like a coronation ceremony that was supposed to be, after all, the coronation of the feminist goddess, that broke the glass ceiling. That was supposed to be the culmination of months of lying, obfuscation, occult rituals, media demagoguery, $100 million negative ad campaign. You see, they had it all prepared. At the end, they had the fractional voting kicking in, the voter fraud, dead people voting, illegals voting. All of it was combined to give Hillary the win. Trump was not supposed to win. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you here? Even the rigged polls were showing her a few points behind Trump. That was to prepare us for the steal, to prepare us psychologically for a possible win by Hillary. I just knew they were laying the groundwork when I saw the ridiculous polls. I mean, compared to the ridiculous size of her rallies, she had to hire people off the streets and hand them, signs, professionally prepared signs. This was the Clinton machine combined with Soros mastermind, combined with the Rothschild empire in an all-out assault of the American people. This was supposed to have been a huge victory for Hillary. The narrative was already prepared. Wolf Blitzer and Rachel Maddow and the rest of the bought and paid for globalists, they all had their talking points ready after the election night. It was supposed to have been a slam dunk steal for Hillary, with the vote switching, the voter fraud, all of that, the intimidation at the polls. And there was no way on earth that Trump should have won. It's been reported that Clinton staffers were so sure she would win, they popped champagne on election day. Instead, what happened? Well, shock of shocks, Donald Trump won. How did that happen? How could that possibly have happened? How did the election go to Trump. See, God has a sense of the dramatic. A few podcasts ago, I said this election would be a lot like the contest between the prophet Elijah and the priest of Baal. You know, Elijah had set up his altar and his sacrifice, and the priests of Baal had set up their altar and their sacrifice. And the priests of Baal did everything they could to get it to spontaneously combust. They cut themselves, they danced themselves to a frenzy. Nothing happened. God even gave them an advantage, an edge. Elijah took a huge handicap. This was going to be a dramatic demonstration of God's power. So Elijah asked that they pour water over his sacrifice and altar. And they drenched that altar 3 times. How could a soaking wet altar ever catch fire? Can you see how this can be applied to the Trump campaign? God gave Trump some huge handicaps, okay? We can see how the MSM tried to snooker him, how they kept the WikiLeaks truth bombs under wraps. Then they attacked him with the Billy Bush tapes. Probably Papa Bush ordered the hit. Plus some in the GOP backstabbed him. Add to all this how James Comey gave Hillary a pass, how the DOJ ordered a stand down. Because Hillary should have been in jail. They threw everything at Trump. They called him a racist, a bigot, a misogynist. They're still doing it. They even blamed him for the violence at his own rallies. One phony scandal after another. False accusations, ridicule, attacks on his wife. By the way, I hope he sues the heebie-jeebies out of the MSM for libel and slander. I hope he does that. They even accused them of rigging elections with the help of the Russians, right after Obama had told us there's no such thing as rigged elections. I mean, are we to believe that, after the DNC stole the nomination from Hillary, the elections could not be rigged or stolen? After they caught that hog, that, what's her name, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, red-handed, and then Hillary hired her in her campaign to reward her for her great work. Are we to believe that there's no monkey business with the Democrats? Because the Democrats, of course, we know, always take the high road, right? Trump even had to cancel a rally in Chicago due to the street violence, which Hillary and Soros funded. He had to put up with debates that were stacked in Hillary's favor because she had been given the questions in advance. The MSM were campaigning for Hillary. They were producing fake polls. Trump had been nagged since day one about his tax returns when the Constitution has no provisions, no test for tax returns for a president. Okay, it's a red herring. And yet, they turn a blind eye to the Clinton Foundation's pay-to-play schemes. So he had to put up with a shill, Wolf Blitzer, Anderson Cooper, the witch, Megyn Kelly, the rhino who sold out Glenn Beck, that Zio-globalist Mark Levin, that jaked-up Tapper. He had to put up with the Hands at The View and Rachel Tomboy Maddow, and the list goes on. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars were spent in negative ads right up from the primary with Jeb Bush to try and knock Trump off. See, no one could have won against those odds, especially not with that steal looming on the day of the election. But God, had other plans. He was saying, bring it on. What else do you have to throw at Trump? You want to rig the voting machines? Go ahead. You want to commit voter fraud and have illegals vote? Do it. You want to hand out ballots with instructions how to vote for Hillary? Be my guest. It would be my pleasure. You want to destroy balance by Republican voters? Go for it. You want to stack your corrupt media against Trump? No biggie. The more vicious the attacks, the better. You want to throw a little violence in the mix? Hey, what's a little violence? Give it everything you got. Come on, give it your best shot. Go ahead, post your ads on Craigslist for paid protesters, for paid audiences. What a great example you guys are for the young people. Yeah, bring out Madonna and Jay-Z and Beyonce and all those other ragtag, satanic, mini millionaires who have sold their souls to Baal and Moloch, who get into spirit cooking and eat children. Bring it on. And then I'll show you what I can do. Because you see, what you don't all understand is that you're dealing with a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, you folks who are listening to me, remember that angel I told you about was hovering, killed 70,000 Israelis because David numbered the population. Well, angels were at work on election day. You know all those votes that the machine switched for Hillary? You know all that election bullshit? The electronic fraud where machines would not accept a vote for Trump and on and on. That's what happened, folks. It came to me early around 4 o'clock around there. It just popped into my head that angels actually reversed all the fraud, all the rigging, so that the steal which everyone in Hillary's demonic camp expected would not happen. So what? What you say? You think God doesn't know a little bit about election software? He's been around for millions of years, and Hillary's going to come in with her wet behind the ears IT punks and show God how it's done to try and take America down? I don't think so. If God can take down 70,000 Israelis to teach King David a lesson, you think just maybe he can't switch off 1 million votes to teach the witch Hillary Clinton a lesson? So Soros, what were you thinking? Let me tell you, Soros, something, man to man. Your plans to take down America will never materialize, and you want to know why? Because we the people know you are behind all the chaos. You're public enemy number one, and we know where you are. You're a done deal. Today, Sunday the 13th, I saw on Twitter just now. I live in LA, by the way, so I've got nothing to do with this, but I saw on Twitter the address, 136 Cadito Street in Katona, New York. Peaceful protest at 9 a.m. Sunday. That's your home address, Soros, right? And then they are posting your office address in New York City, 250 West 55th Street, 27th floor. Phone number, 212-872-1054. I wonder why. All I know is, Soros, you're a threat to the Republic, and you need to be arrested for sedition, treason, and seditious conspiracy. In Austin, Texas, 900 professional protesters were bussed in from Dallas. They used USA Coach. Their number is 888-970-7233. 15 buses were hired by the DNC. This is right after the election. Word is that Soros and Hillary are trying to spark another orange revolution, only they're going to call it purple revolution. You can check out the hashtag purple revolution. It's gaining some traction. That's why maybe Bill and Hillary were wearing purple in her victory speech. And maybe that's why, if you go far back enough to John Kasich's victory rally and the primaries, you'll see that all the balloons and the confetti was purple. Of course, all this needs more corroboration and confirmation. Hillary's rhetoric about supporting the election outcome only applied when her supporters weren't wreaking havoc across America, tweeted Carmine Zozora. And another thing, you know what? I think the penalties for voter fraud are not harsh enough, and that's why it keeps recurring in every election. See, I think voter fraud is the equivalent of a disguised enemy combatant trying to destroy the backbone of our republic. The most sacred link to our democracy is our vote, our God-given right to vote and have a fair election. And I think, this is just my own personal opinion, I think the penalty should be death by firing squad for anyone who rigs or steals the election. Then let's see how much voter fraud we'd have in the future. I'd bet it would go down to zero. Either way, God's at the helm. Don't ever underestimate God, especially when Christians pray for deliverance. And that's why they hate Christians so much. They hate them because their prayers are answered. It makes all the witches and the Satanists look really, really bad. So while we're uniting as a nation and as preparations are made for the transition team in the White House, I want to thank God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for delivering us from the globalists, for being our most valuable player. I don't know if I'll keep podcasting. I'm not sure where this is going to take me. I don't know what to talk about anymore now that Donald Trump has won. All I know is that it's been a great honor and a privilege to have contributed my 2 bits in this historic campaign. I'll see which way I'm directed. So God bless President Trump and God bless America.